Following the lectures in the course, in the footsteps of the Crusaders in the Holy Land, we are now beginning a series of tours in the Holy Land, in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, in the footsteps of the Crusaders. And this is our first stop. I'm standing now in the northwest corner of the wall of Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem. The Crusaders' story actually began here. How did it begin? Well, if you recall from the lectures, the Crusaders were moving from the north downwards to the south of the land of Israel, and at one point they turned west from the coastal plain and reached Jerusalem. It was on the 7th of June, 1099. It was the middle of the summer. It was very hot that summer. The Crusaders were tired, and they wanted to get things done now. So they decided to attack Jerusalem from the most convenient spot, right here in the northwest corner of the old city. Obviously, when you look at the walls today, the wall that we see right behind me, it is not the wall the Crusaders saw. This is a late Ottoman, meaning Turkish wall from the 16th century, hundreds of years after the Crusades. But when the Crusades arrived in the Holy Land, this wall stood up. This is part of a Muslim tower named Tancred's Tower. But wait a second. Tancred is one of the leaders of the Crusades. He is one of the leaders of the First Crusade. Why would a tower built by the Muslims be named after a Crusader leader? Well, the story goes that when the Crusaders came to the Holy Land, when they came to Jerusalem on June 7th, 1099, they stopped here and they decided to attack the city from this point. The only thing was, how do you take a wall that high? Well, they had a plan, a ridiculous plan, I must admit, but that was the Crusader mind. The Crusaders built a ladder. They brought the ladder, leaned it on the wall, and climbed up. They were led by Raybald of Chartres, one of their heroes. He was carrying his sword, along with other soldiers around him, attacking the top of the wall. The Muslims were shocked at the beginning, but at some point, a brave Muslim soldier approached Raybald and with one blow of his sword, cut off his hand. Raybald managed single-handedly to come down, and eventually he was taken back, but the Crusader attack was broken at this point. Now, when you hear this story, you may be thinking, were the Crusaders out of their mind? What were they thinking? Can an army really break into the walls of a city using a simple ladder? It sounds crazy, but not for the Crusaders. Remember, the Crusaders came along the coastal plain on the way to the Holy Land. Before setting foot in the Holy Land, they already managed to conquer Antioch, Edessa, Nicaea, 3 main cities, and then they get to the Holy Land and they conquer Bethlehem, and they take over Jaffa, and they take over Ramla, 3 cities in the Holy Land. For them, it was a clear proof that God is with them. Deus vult, God wills it. And if God is with you, you can actually take over a city using a ladder. However, it didn't work for the Crusaders, so they now realize they have to do something better. They have to invest some efforts in conquering the city. However, they lacked wood for building a proper siege machines to break into the city. You need a battering ram, you need towers on wheels. To build these, you need wood, and there was simply not enough wood. Why? Because the Muslims in Jerusalem anticipated that, and they burnt the forests around Jerusalem. So what the Crusaders do is they send their troops to the coastal plain, to the city of Jaffa. There, a small navy of Crusaders was actually in the harbor of Jaffa. They convinced the captains of the ships to dismantle their ships, bring the wood to Jerusalem, and build siege engines. Meanwhile, when the troops of the Crusaders are on their way to Jaffa, and the Crusaders are besieging the city, something happens. A local priest, we know his name is Peter or Petrus. Peter comes to the Crusader leaders and he says that God revealed to him that what the Crusaders should do in order to take over the city is the following. They have to repent, pray to God, go to the Mount of Olives, and then come down, surround the city 7 times, and blow the trumpets, and the city's walls would fall, as they did in the case of Joshua, who took Jericho. It didn't work for the Crusaders, however, so back to plan A, meaning waiting for the wood to come from Jaffa. Indeed, the wood came, and now they had to replan the attack. Where exactly is the best place to attack the city? So the only thing remaining from that famous attack, or the failed attack on the walls of Jerusalem in 1099, with the ladder, was the name of this tower, the Tower of Tancred. The Muslim tower was renamed after Tancred, who led the attack on Jerusalem. But now that the Crusaders built the machines, they built the siege engines, the battering rams, and the attack towers, they are now looking for a better place to attack, a place that would accommodate these machines. But they had a problem. Jerusalem's walls in these areas, the northern areas of Jerusalem at the time, were surrounded by a deep moat. A moat is basically a trench. Sometimes it's dug in the earth, sometimes it's hewn in bedrock, such as right here in front of us. So in order to attack the walls, they had to choose a place where the moat would be narrow enough so they could fill some of it and then drive the machine on top of it, as close as they can get to the wall. We don't know why, but they decided that the best place to attack the city is opposite what today is the Rockefeller Museum, next to the Flowers Gate, or Herod's Gate, as it is known in English. The timing of the attack was chosen carefully by the Crusaders. It's the early hours of the morning of July 15th, 1099, Friday morning, exactly the time in which Jesus was suffering on the cross. The attack takes place led by a battering ram. The battering ram was driven on top of the narrow earth fill in the moat, approaching the wall. The battering ram is basically a large wooden beam with a strong, hard metal head. When you batter the wall, hopefully some damage will be done, and therefore you can break into the city. Of course, the Muslims were not sitting idle looking at the Crusaders. They aimed their arrows at the battering ram. Now, a battering ram is an inflammable machine. It's made of wood and animal skin. What the Muslims do, they shoot arrows at it, but not just any arrow. These arrows carry fire. It's not the fire you know from home. It is called Greek fire. No one knows its ingredients, but according to the sources of the time, you cannot extinguish it with water. If you do try to extinguish it with water, you only get greater flames. So they were hoping to burn down the attacking battering ram. The Crusaders were trying to avoid that. But suddenly something happens that changes everything. The battering ram simply breaks down. It managed to inflict some damage to the wall. The Crusaders want to pull it back and bring the siege towers. But they can't do that because it's now stuck on their way. So what happens now is that the Crusaders try to set fire to their own siege engine to burn it down and clear the way. The Muslims look at it from above and they try to extinguish the fire by dropping buckets of water down the road. The battle continues for hours until eventually the Crusaders manage to jump over onto the walls and break into the city. And this is the time when the great massacre begins. In Jerusalem, there are Muslims and Jews trying to defend themselves. And now the Crusaders swarm into the city, slaughtering everyone. According to some Crusader sources, the blood was so high that it got as high as the mouths of the horses. Now, obviously, this is an exaggeration, but it just shows how great the massacre was, how deadly that event was for so many people in Jerusalem. Eventually, the Crusaders found a group of Jews who tried to find refuge in the local synagogue. They locked the door on them. It was made of wood, and they set fire to the synagogue. So they were destroyed this way. And finally, the massacre stopped. The dead corpses were everywhere. Every crusader who wanted could go into a house, hang his sword at the entrance, and that house will now belong to him. These events signify the beginning of the Crusader history, the Crusader era in the Holy Land. So now let us explore some more about the Crusader city of Jerusalem, its churches, its streets, its palaces, its fortifications, and so on and so forth. Let's go.